the details, but those incentives are there for every Ugandan. We don't make enough effort to find out what they are.
So Charlie, that comes back to you, that there has to be, where I started from, the questions that I started with, a centralized system that can avail potential investors and the existing developers already information that is important.
Okay, may I ask you, have you ever visited Ugandan Investment Authority offices?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been there?
Yes.
Have you inquired what incentives there are for you?
As a business person, as
somebody who wants to invest?
Not entirely.
So this is what I'm saying, that unless you yourself make an effort of finding what incentives are being offered to Ugandans, you'll never know. And then you have the Minister of Investment. They have an office where they offer you export processing zones. They have their own schemes. Then the Ministry of Finance itself has its own schemes. So there are many schemes available. You just have to make your own effort to find out what is available to every Ugandan. And Ugandans have an advantage because the threshold of investment is lower. For foreign people, it's much higher. So those incentives are there for Ugandans. It's just we don't make an effort to understand them. I'm a Ugandan, and if I do a project, I go and see them, and I understand what's available at the time. So some of the imports of your materials can be tax-free, and right. Things like that.
All right. Before you go off the microphone, your thoughts generally now, in this time that we're in, of the pandemic generally, how does a landlord like yourself, like the others in CBD and elsewhere in the country, recover? We had Judy hinting at was it Judy or Shirley, that tenants are leaving. They are going on the outskirts, and there are many buildings now that are empty. So how can one recover from this?
Well, I think this is a very hard time for some tenants in certain sector. It's not hard time for every tenant in every sector. Because one of the hardest hit sector, in my opinion, is what you call a retail sector. Okay? But if you're a manufacturer and you are renting a warehouse, you're not hit. If you're an office, service industry working from offices, your business has not been hit. Because your business is going on, you still need that infrastructure of an office. The biggest issue we've had is mainly with what we call arcades. When downtown was closed, our tenants could not operate, and they were the hardest hit. So we understand their situation, and we would actually deal with the tenant to tenant, give them some incentives of 50% rebate on rent. See, what people also must understand, there's no incentives or support given to any businesses in this country, either by the government through revenue or anything. Not even you had a rebate on your property rates. When your shops were closed, in most normal countries, you don't pay property taxes. But here, they make you pay. Your taxation is, you had to pay. Well, they said deferred it for new months, but they never give you a reprieve. So there's all these things about support is all philosophical, but not real. So, me as a landlord, my job is to make sure that the tenants I have, how did they keep going, and make sure that they don't move out. How do I support their businesses so they continue? When they continue in our premises, we also continue. So we find a win-win situation. But there's not even one place where the government here has given incentive.
Which again brings the fact that
And that's fine. You know, we are a nation.
Bold lobbying.
We are a nation which is growing, so there's no bad feeling. We all have to survive and survive in these hard times. So what is important from landlord perspective is to how to keep your tenants. If I lose this one, will I get somebody better, or will it be empty? So we try and make sure that the tenants who are there, they also survive in business. We said to them, look, when these buildings were closed down, we had to put workers on the building. They had to stay overnight. We used to feed them. We had to give them salaries, make sure their families had money, so everybody does a good job. If you don't clean a building for 1 week, it'll all get worse, and it costs more money to put back into its normal condition. You have to have securities. You have to, firefighting equipment. You have lighting systems. So we said, okay, for 2 or 3 months, you only pay 50%, and we'll suffer 50% because we had already a cost. As a landlord, we didn't benefit, but we didn't want to lose also. So it's to find a win-win situation with your tenants. And that's how you survive. Most of the, also the reality is, it's only Kampala downtown which was closed. The whole of this country was open, up country. Every shop, every businesses were open. There was a lockdown only for downtown.
It was felt in Kampala more than...
Only Kampala. Everything else was open. Tell me if I'm wrong.
All right. I think I'll throw that to all of us here. How would we recover from the pandemic in as far as real estate sector is concerned, Judy?
Thank you very much, Frank. I think the biggest impediment or challenge to recovery has been the start-stop sort of a strategy of managing the pandemic. And nobody's to blame for that. I think government has responded as they saw fit. But unfortunately, what has happened is because of the start-stop, we've lost momentum. As we're just getting up and beginning to make things work, as businesses are beginning to steady their cash flows, as retailers are beginning to start trading, we have another wave and, we have to stop again and have a lockdown. And starting again, that's why it's taken us long to rebound, because starting all over again takes time. So the only way to go about that, and empirically what has happened around the world, recovery has been fast-tracked by increasing the vaccination regime. So until we get as many people fully vaccinated, we will continue having the various waves. The infection rates will continue going up, and government will have no option but to continue imposing the lockdowns and the restrictions. Now, are there better ways of doing things like this? Yes, I think there could be. I definitely think there could be, because we have to ask ourselves if the incentives are actually achieving what the intended objective was in the first place. Yeah. For example, we are the only country that still has, some of our sectors still completely locked down and closed.
True.
Okay, they're not yet open. And yet, in all honesty, do we really have a curfew at the end of the day? Or is it just a curfew in theory? Things like that. There's no way the retail trade is going to improve when we're closing down at 7 o'clock. And that's the reality. Because that means restaurants have got to take their last orders at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock and close by, 6:30 or 7 because people need to go home. Now that sector of retail is completely dead and they're struggling. It's going to take them a very long time to recover. And it's a whole ecosystem. With schools still closed, schools are a very, very big source of demand for a lot of fast-moving consumable goods, okay, which feeds into the bigger economy, and the ecosystem continues working and functioning vibrantly. Until that happens, we're going to have an impact on the other side. Manufacturers are going to be impacted as well. And it's all interrelated and interconnected at the end of the day. If retailers are struggling and the consumers are not there to buy the goods, then the landlord struggles as well, because they have to give rebates, because the tenants cannot afford to pay their rent, because the shopping malls and arcades are suffering, they've got no patrons coming in. I think I'm building the whole picture now, and you can see the story there. So how are we going to recover? I think we will just need to hope that vaccination rates increase, okay, that infection rates are kept as low as possible, that we can try and attract more business into the country and into the economy, so that our hospitality sector also becomes vibrant again. We need to get more passengers coming in, because it's the same people who are feeding into the retail sector. Okay, business needs to stabilize and begin to pick up in earnest, because the office traders as well, the office occupants are business people. So if business is low, they don't have enough money to pay their rent, and vice versa.
All right, Irene. Q1 seems to be an indicator of a future that won't be so good going forward, in as far as real estate is concerned, seeing from the decline in the first quarter. But your thoughts quickly on how this sector can recover, so that URA is able to get something more from there.
Thank you, Frank. From the sector players, there's hope. All is not lost, because yes, the economy is not yet fully open, but at least we see a difference from when we're in a total lockdown to now when we're at least partially open. Of course, businesses may not have gone to 100% as we want them, but also I'm aware that some of the businesses changed form. They may not necessarily be out in the shop, but Charlie mentioned the online. The form has changed. So we are banking on, as we incrementally open, as we become more active. Judy has mentioned a very important part of the school and how it plays into the economy. But what I would maybe use this opportunity to is to embrace our new innovation of electronic invoicing. Now that tells us a lot of what's happening in terms of transaction. This is a real-time system that shows the invoicing, because we are in a cash economy where we can't track these transactions. But we can possibly, if we have all this information in one place, maybe our policymakers, the Ministry of Finance, could see, because that would show you the level of transaction. That could show you the impact of some of these things on the sectors that we're talking about. But without that information currently, we may not know what's happening out there. We may have to maybe estimate or imagine. Yet, these are real things. But until as a tax authority we are required to get these statistics, we do not have them, then we cannot support possibly adequately the policymakers. So I implore everyone to acquire electronic invoicing or receipting if they are not registered for VAT, so that it can be seen. Your transactions will be seen. And your
freeze, how has it been helpful in the real estate sector?
In the real estate,
in the last 1 year or so?
Well, averagely, before I even go to just the real estate, averagely, I think enrollment, we're at around 60%. Would love to be at 100%, but the real estate especially, we will need to work together to see how do we help them in this particular area, because largely what is affecting the real estate sector in terms of taxation is lack of documentation. So this would be a very, very big step in telling us what's happening in that sector, how is it being affected, who is earning. Shirley mentioned the value chain, who actually benefits in this whole thing, because there's quite a number of people in there that are not in this sector or are not even anywhere but are earning from the sector. So once this system is adopted, it will give us a lot of insight in what's happening in the different sectors.
Thank you. Shirley, your thoughts on recovery? But before, viewers, you can send in your questions or remarks on 0772 14 20 51. Send a WhatsApp message or a traditional SMS as we know it. I'll be able to read some of those questions or remarks shortly. Shall back to you. How do you recover from the pandemic going forward?
Yes, as long as the population keeps growing, real estate demand will always be there. And we know that every year we have 300,000, I think, new households, and majority are in urban centers. We shall always grow. As long as we are not going back to another lockdown and we are vaccinated, as Ms. Judy said, there is hope that the sector will grow because the economy now is active. People are trading. We are seeing the tourists are coming in. Even though the schools are closed, they are operating online. People are teaching online and they are earning. So money is circulating, and we are sure with time we are going to be better.
And I'm certain Irene and team have ideas on how to access that online system as well to be able to get something. All right, from Ranjit Singh, greetings to URA and special respect to Dr. Subil as my great mentor. I think you know each other. Odong Simon to Dr. Subil, kindly throw more light on how me as a low-income earner can pay for a condominium, yet they demand for a huge down payment.
Can you repeat that?
Okay, he wants to understand how, as a low-income earner, as a low-income earner, how can he pay for a condominium? You could explain to him what it takes to own a unit on a condominium property.
Well, this is what I was saying earlier, that you work out the amount of rental you are paying, and if you're able to get a bank who can lend you money to buy housing which fits in with your rental payment, then I think 10, 15 years is not a long time. You know, 20, 25-year mortgage in Europe is quite common. Because I remember about my first house when I was 18 years of age. I saved enough money to buy my first house. And I got a 25-year mortgage. You know, but I think if you can find, there are a lot of products available. And there are also certain developers who can give you 5 years they're built in your cost, but I think they actually can give you low-cost condominiums, where you don't pay for 5 years, and you save that money and then, you know, reduce your borrowing later. So there are a lot of schemes. You need to understand the schemes.
Okay, I think that the down payment seems to worry people a lot. I have had this.
Sorry?
The down payment, the payment, the first payment that you make at once, seems to worry people a lot.
No, we had well, in my opinion, you had Stenbeck, who was quite aggressive in this market, and they are also looking at the schemes where you don't have to make a down payment. As long as you have a job where they can see the continuity and as a secure job, I think it should not be a problem.
All right. My view, my concern is about low-income earners. Why is building in Uganda more expensive, yet it is among low-developed countries? Jody, why? Dr. Sudil was saying earlier that, which is the fact anyway? It takes 4 to 6 years to complete a house, you know, if you are an income earner, that is. So somebody is asking, why is building so expensive? Why does it take this long? Could it be a factor of cost? What is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. Land generally is quite expensive. If land is not a third of the value of the project, if it's more than a third of the value of the project, then it's too expensive, and the numbers begin not to make sense. But the other reason is that the cost of materials is also quite high. I think East Africa has one of the highest costs of cement globally, for one reason or another, but mainly because I think the capacity for cement manufacturers to build enough cement to supply the country is limited. So you find that we have a bit of a challenge when it comes to the cost of building materials. A lot of the finishing and fittings are also imported because, and the taxes on that is quite high. So when you're importing, all your finishes and fittings, obviously the price of the cost of your property is going to go up as well. Labor is relatively cheap, so that's not too much of a problem. And then again, most importantly, the cost of finance is very high. So when you add all that together, it compounds the cost and it makes it quite expensive at the end of the day.